The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Attorneys flipped through folders, murmurs floated among the audience, and the distant echo of a gavel rang out from another chamber. Judge Caroline Mercer sat upright at the bench, her expression calm and measured. To her, it felt like just another routine hearing. At least, that's what she believed. The bailiff's voice rang out, announcing the next case. The State of Eastbridge versus Malcolm Reynolds. Caroline adjusted her posture, her palms resting on the smooth walnut wood beneath her. She skimmed the file. Charges of battery, theft, resisting law enforcement. A familiar wave of sadness swept over her. Another young man caught in a cycle that never seemed to end. But when the defendant entered, her world seemed to shift. The man in chains, hands and feet bound, wasn't a stranger. It was Malcolm. Her Malcolm. Her throat tightened as old memories rushed in. The warm evenings spent chasing bikes along the gravel roads of Maple Grove. Late-night talks beneath the elm tree behind her house. Childhood promises to always be there for one another, no matter what. But the man before her wasn't the carefree boy she once knew. His frame was worn, his face aged by struggle, yet his eyes, those deep, searching eyes, were the same. Her hand trembled slightly on the gavel. For the first time in her judicial career, she faltered. The room seemed to close in, air thick, with disbelief. Malcolm met her gaze, stunned and silent. Recognition flared briefly in his expression before he lowered his head, avoiding her eyes. The room held its breath. Caroline forced herself to speak. "Mr. Reynolds, you are charged with assault and theft. How do you plead?" His voice was rough, distant, almost broken. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Her chest pounded. She wanted to stop everything, ask him what happened, how their paths had split so completely. But the robe she wore required her to stay composed. "Proceed," she said, though her voice felt borrowed. As the prosecutor began their opening remarks, Caroline's thoughts spun wildly. This wasn't just any trial. This was Malcolm. And now she had to figure out how to separate her duty from her memories before the damage was done. The courtroom faded around her, pulling her back to days long before she wore black robes and held a gavel. They had grown up on opposite sides of Maple Grove, not far in miles, but worlds apart by the invisible lines of a divided town. Her family had a modest cottage with a neat little garden. His lived in a sagging farmhouse at the edge of the fields. Their friendship was unexpected, born from chance. She remembered it clearly. A lazy afternoon when she wandered too far, finding him by the riverbank, struggling to free a tangled fishing line. She offered to help, and that moment became the start of years of hidden games, shared dreams, and quiet understanding. "Caroline," he once whispered beside her under a blanket of stars, "you ever think about just leaving? Going where no one stares at us for sitting together?" She laughed it off back then. But Malcolm had meant it. Even young, he saw the truth. He knew how unfair the world could be for someone like him. Their connection deepened, despite gossip, sneers, and the unspoken rules that surrounded them. But the weight of it all was always there, a quiet pressure neither could ignore. And then it ended. The summer before they entered high school, her father found them sitting together on the porch. His voice had been cold, sharp, commanding. "Caroline, get inside, now!" She'd paused, her eyes darting to Malcolm, who stood motionless, like time had frozen around him. "Go ahead," he murmured, his voice carrying the weight of knowing. "I'll catch you later." But later never came. Her father had banned her from speaking to Malcolm again, and not long after, his family packed up and left for good. Caroline threw herself into her studies, her dreams propelling her far beyond the edges of Maple Grove. Law school became her escape, a path built on ideals of fairness and justice. Still, she never forgot the boy who first taught her what it meant to be brave. Now, sitting behind the bench, she found herself wondering what happened to him after she walked into that house and silently shut the door on their friendship. His record sat in front of her. A string of minor charges, shoplifting, trespassing, nothing violent. But how much of a person's truth could be captured in a list of accusations? The prosecutor's voice pulled her back to the present. He was laying out the charges. Malcolm was accused of attacking a cashier during a robbery at a corner store in Riverbend. The clerk had suffered cuts and bruises. The register had been emptied. Police had found Malcolm just blocks away, allegedly still carrying the stolen cash. Caroline studied him from the bench. He sat quietly, shoulders low, hands folded neatly, yet his face revealed nothing. Was he guilty? Or was there more to the story than what the prosecution had painted? Court recessed for lunch. Alone in her chambers, Caroline tried to steady her thoughts. Her assistant, Nora, entered cautiously. "Judge Mercer, is everything all right? You seemed distracted." Caroline hesitated. Should she tell Nora the truth? Would it be unprofessional to admit she knew the man on trial? Instead, she offered a quiet smile. "I'm fine. Just a lot going on today." But she wasn't fine. How could she be when a chapter of her past, long buried, was sitting right there, waiting for judgment? When the trial resumed, the room was packed. Reporters scribbled notes, papers rustled, and the prosecutor, Richard Stanton, a sharp, calculating man, rose to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, voice precise and controlled, "this case is about violence. A man walked into a neighborhood store and, without warning, assaulted an innocent employee before fleeing with stolen money." He pointed across the courtroom. "The evidence will clearly prove that Malcolm Reynolds committed this crime." Caroline felt her stomach twist. His tone was cold, as if Malcolm was just a case number, not a person. She looked toward Malcolm. His eyes remained fixed on the table, expression unreadable. Then the defense attorney stood, Elisa Grant, young but composed, with a voice that held the room with ease. "The prosecution wants you to see this as simple," she began, "but the truth rarely is. Mr. Reynolds has insisted on his innocence from day one, and we intend to show that this narrative, built on shaky assumptions, falls apart under real scrutiny." The first witness took the stand, the store clerk from the night of the incident. He described a man, matching Malcolm's build, entering the store, arguing with the cashier, and leaping over the counter. His account was detailed. Too detailed. When Elisa cross-examined him, her tone sharpened. "Mr. Parker, you said the man wore a red hoodie. Is that correct?" "Yes." The clerk responded. "Did you see his face?" "Not exactly. It was dark, and the hood was up." Elisa nodded, pacing slowly. "So, what you're saying is, you couldn't positively identify the person who attacked the clerk?" "Well, no, not for certain." "No further questions," Elisa said abruptly, cutting him off. From the bench, Caroline noticed Malcolm shift slightly, his shoulders squaring just a bit, as if the brief exchange had lit a small spark of hope inside him. The next item presented was a security video from the store. The footage was grainy, the lighting poor, showing a figure in a red sweatshirt entering the building. The prosecution insisted the person was Malcolm, but the footage lacked clarity. There were no distinct features, no clear view of the suspect's face. As the video played, Caroline leaned forward, watching closely. Could that really be him? The person in the footage moved fast, reaching over the counter, then vanished from view. The clip ended abruptly, leaving behind a gap, an uncomfortable silence in the story. The defense leaned on an alibi. Malcolm claimed he was walking home from a friend's place at the time, but the friend refused to testify, fearing backlash from neighbors. Elisa argued that a scared witness didn't erase the truth of her client's innocence. Still, Caroline caught glimpses of doubt in the jury's faces. They wanted certainty, and this case offered very little of it. With each passing hour, Caroline felt the weight of her seat grow heavier. She was supposed to be neutral, a guardian of fairness. But how could she be when the man before her was the same boy who once sat beside her under the stars? Now he was fighting for his life, and she was the one deciding which way the scale would tip. When court recessed for the evening, Caroline stayed at the bench, her fingers brushing the rim of the gavel. She longed to talk to him, to ask him what happened, how everything unraveled. But she knew the rules. No contact, no exceptions. As she watched Malcolm being led out in cuffs, her resolve cracked. She'd always believed in the system, believed that it would bring out the truth. But for the first time, she wondered if justice ever really saw the whole picture. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs the next morning. They'd reached a critical moment. The defense would now present its case. Elisa Porter stood tall and called her first major witness, Officer Marcus Holden, the officer who had made the arrest. Caroline leaned forward slightly, sensing that, if any holes were to appear, they might show up now. Holden, a broad-shouldered man with a rough edge to his voice, took the stand. "Officer Holden," Elisa began with a composed tone, "you were the one who detained my client. Is that correct?" "That's right," he replied curtly. "You mentioned in your report that Mr. Reynolds was found about 2 blocks from the convenience store, correct?" "Yes." "And what made you believe he was the suspect?" Holden shifted. "He matched the description. Black male, early 40s, dark clothes." Elisa raised a brow. Dark clothes. But the suspect in the footage wore a red sweatshirt, didn't they? He nodded reluctantly. "Did you find a red sweatshirt on Mr. Reynolds when you searched him?" A pause. "No, but he might have ditched." Elisa stepped closer. "Might have? Did you or any other officer search the area to locate this hypothetical sweatshirt?" His jaw clenched. "No, we didn't have time. We made the arrest quickly." Elisa didn't back off. "So, just to be clear, you arrested my client based on a vague match with no physical evidence connecting him to the scene?" Holden remained silent, but the silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. Caroline's eyes drifted toward the jury. Several members exchanged uncertain looks, but Elisa wasn't finished. "Officer Holden, do you remember if Mr. Reynolds said anything at the moment of his arrest?" "He protested," Holden replied. "Said he was innocent. And did you investigate that claim? Or did you decide guilt based solely on how he looked?" Holden's face tightened. "I followed procedure." "Procedure?" Elisa echoed, her tone thick with doubt. "No further questions, Your Honor." Murmurs filled the courtroom again as Holden stepped down, his credibility clearly shaken. Caroline's heart beat faster. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was something deeper, a moment of reckoning, not just for Malcolm, but for a system too quick to judge him. Then came a twist no one expected. Elisa called an expert witness to the stand, a forensic analyst who had reviewed the store's security footage. The analyst explained that based on the height and body type in the video, there was no way to confirm the figure was Malcolm. Even more troubling, the timestamp on the recording had been altered. That cast serious doubt on its reliability. The prosecutor dismissed it all as speculation. But Caroline saw the shift in the jury. A ripple of doubt passed through the room, and she could feel it, like a shadow settling in. As the day neared its end, Malcolm was given the choice to testify. Elisa had warned him of the risks, but he was resolute. He stood, chains gently rattling, and made his way to the stand. His voice was soft, but filled with raw honesty. "I've made mistakes," he began, his eyes locked on the jury. "I've taken wrong turns, trusted people I shouldn't have. But I didn't do this. That night, I was walking home. I wasn't doing anything wrong. The officers didn't ask questions. They just decided I looked like the guy." His voice broke slightly. "My whole life, I've been fighting to be seen as more than what people expect when they look at me. But this? I'm tired. I just want the truth to matter." Caroline's throat tightened as he returned to his seat. His words hung heavy in the air, not just a plea for fairness, but for humanity. She looked to the jury. Some appeared conflicted, others moved. This was no longer just about evidence. It had become a test of conscience, a fight against bias and assumption. Caroline reminded herself of her role. She wasn't just there to enforce the law. She had to interpret it with integrity, in pursuit of something real, true justice. The final day of the trial arrived, carrying the weight of expectation. Closing arguments were sharp, well rehearsed. The prosecutor leaned into the system's structure, urging the jury to trust its process. Elisa, however, asked them to look deeper, to see the gaps in the story and the person behind the accusations. Caroline listened, her face still, but her thoughts raced. She could not guide the jury, but if there was ambiguity, she would carry the responsibility of deciding what justice looked like. The jury deliberated for hours. People came and went, stretching, whispering, waiting. Malcolm sat silently, his hands clasped. He hadn't looked at Caroline once since the trial began, and she didn't blame him. What could she possibly say that would make this right? At last, the bailiff returned. The jury had reached a decision. The courtroom fell into hushed silence as the foreperson stood, a sheet of paper trembling in her grip. In the case of the State of Eastbridge versus Malcolm Reynolds, we find the defendant, a pause so long it felt endless. Not guilty. Gasps, whispers, relieved exclamations filled the room. Caroline brought her gavel down, calling the court to order. Malcolm's shoulders slumped, as if a heavy burden had finally been set down, but his expression remained unreadable. He had gained his freedom. But it was clear this wasn't a clean victory. It had cost him something. Caroline addressed the court, her tone calm and resolute. "The jury has delivered its verdict. Mr. Reynolds, you are free to go. This court is adjourned." As the room began to clear, Caroline stayed seated, watching quietly as Malcolm signed the release documents. For a moment, she thought he might leave without a glance. But then he turned, his steps slow, his face composed. The courtroom was nearly empty now, only a few clerks packing up files and Nora organizing folders near the exit. Malcolm stopped just short of the bench. His voice was low, measured. "You didn't owe me anything," he said. "But I have to ask, why didn't you say something? You knew who I was." Caroline's throat tightened. Her words tangled, difficult to speak. "Because I couldn't," she finally said. "I had to remain neutral. If I had said anything, I could have compromised the entire case." Malcolm looked at her, a mix of pain and acceptance in his eyes. "Neutral," he repeated. "That's the thing, Caroline. The world's never been neutral for people like me." She lowered her gaze, her eyes tracing the wooden edge of the bench. "You're right," she whispered. "I wish I had done more back then and now." Malcolm let out a breath, his stance softening. "We were kids. We didn't understand the way things worked. But you do now, don't you?" "I do," Caroline said firmly. "And I'm sorry." He gave a small, quiet nod, then turned away, his shoulders straight as he walked out through the tall courtroom doors. Caroline remained alone in the empty chamber, his words echoing in her mind. She had upheld the law, but the truth this trial had unearthed went far beyond legal codes. Justice wasn't just about facts and rulings. It was about lives and the systems that shaped them. For Caroline, it was a reckoning. A moment that pulled her out of routine and into responsibility. As she stepped outside that evening, the sun dipping low and stretching shadows across the courthouse steps, Caroline made a quiet vow to herself. She couldn't rewrite the past, but moving forward, she would use her position for more than process, for more than protocol. She would use it for change. It wouldn't be easy. It might never be enough. But she owed that effort to Malcolm and to herself.